Welcome back, family. Hope you guys are doing well. We are now reaching the end of our first ever school year with Creation Standard. And so I wanted to go over some more of the evidence that we have all found together as we have explored and compared worldly wisdom to our Father's wisdom. And it's things that are humbling, to say the least, because they show me that we need to keep on exploring and putting our Father's words and His prophets' words to the test. And it's something that is a gift that keeps on giving when you do that. And so I wanted to share just a quick summary of highlight some of the things we've already talked about for those of you who may not have seen our videos in the past in terms of how the descriptions in the Bible match what we can prove with real data. And that's data that's been collected throughout time with weather and climate, wind patterns, water currents. All these things match the descriptions we have from the prophets. And so we're going to be looking at that. But to refresh your memory about the South and how it's not like the North, we're going to look at what we just covered with those winds in the heavens, something that I think we all missed because we grew up not knowing what was out there. And the word comes alive and makes a lot more sense. Things like the four winds of heavens that were mentioned not only by our Messiah, but many prophets, including John in Revelation, talking about the four winds, something that wasn't discovered until the 1920s. That is amazing because we have four jet streams up above us, thanks to those portals in the heavens that were mentioned in great detail by Enoch when he was given his tour of the biblical earth. And he said that he had to go to the ends of the earth to see these portals in the heavens. And there wasn't just one with each direction, there were three with each of these directions he went. And he went to the north and he saw the ends of the earth. And I know that doesn't make sense with current maps. I'm going to go over why it makes sense with maps from a few hundred years ago, as well as maps that are far more ancient. And I say far more ancient, the oldest world map, allegedly, in existence comes from Babylon, of course, but we're going to look at that and see how it also matches Enoch's descriptions of the world as well as maps from the 1500s. And so, right here, Enoch seeing the ends of the earth, portals, three of them in the north, three of them in the west, and three in the south. So he went to three of our four directions. I'm sure there would be three more. This is in Enoch chapter 34. I'm not going to go over it because we've talked about it before. You guys can look that up yourself and read the verse here. Maybe pause the video and read it if you want to read it and you missed it. And winds coming from those four different directions would most likely help create four jet streams circling up above us, going, believe it or not, in the same direction they say the globe is spinning, but they're going faster than the globe they're trying to keep up with. Remember, they tell us that our air is stuck to the earth with gravity, and they literally say that air is sticky. When you look it up, like, why is it staying with the earth? They say, well, it's got this sticky property where it just sticks to the earth, and somehow it's going faster than the earth is spinning, about 150 miles per hour faster. You can imagine how fast that is at the equator. Not only that, they're running further around the racetrack, so to speak. When you look at where your starting position should be, people starting towards the inside lane have less distance to cover. So those outside lanes have to go further. They're going not only further, but faster. And so all of this makes sense on the biblical earth, where you have winds being blown from the portals of the heavens over an immovable world. It would be easy for them to go faster than the world is moving because the world is not moving. And so the winds making more sense on the biblical earth. We're going to go over more of that. More has since come to the surface, but plane flights in Antarctica versus the Arctic make a lot more sense on the biblical earth because you're flying about three times higher in the Arctic. When I was looking into the elevations the planes fly, they talked about air pressures being different in the Antarctic compared to up north. And I thought, air pressure increases as you have more air above you. Obviously, when you're climbing mountains, air pressure is going to decrease greatly. But our Father designed air to have a certain density to stack up to the highest places in the world. So when you go to the top of Antarctica, which is our current alleged highest place in the world, I believe there's higher mountains as you go further out, according to Enoch, but you have less air pressure, less air above you. With a firmament, you have less air above you as you go south. more air as you go north. And when you look at air pressure maps of the world, of course, the lowest air pressures are in the south. The highest are in the north. Makes more sense on the biblical earth because colder air should actually have higher air pressure. The coldest air is in the south and it has the lowest air pressure. And so those were some of the things we looked at in the past. Now we're going to look at those older maps that we've talked about many times in the past. We've had someone volunteer to translate them and went through and looked at some of the descriptions of the center of the known world, or the magnetic center, I guess you would say, not the actual center of the earth mentioned in prophecy, because earth is just dry land. They were talking about the center of the dry land that they were on. And when you look at the promised land, it's near the center of this massive dry land area. And who knows how it looked back then. But we do have some really accurate maps from the 1500s, not long after, Christopher Columbus allegedly discovered America. We have people showing us full to scale maps of the world, which would require a lot of exploration or possibly them flying up above using some sort of, blimp type of device, airships, hot air balloons, whatever they would have had back then. I don't think they were just going around in boats, figuring this stuff out. I believe technology was far greater back then, especially for them to get this accurate of a map. I could not imagine someone going around in a boat and constructing this map within their lifetime. And so they have these really cool maps that match up with the air age maps of the world. You can see there how close they are in scale to maps from the 1900s. And when you go and zoom in on the outer edges of these maps, they have something spectacular that I'd missed before, and it's those portals of the heavens. They have a zoomed out version of the world. They have a world map right here with the land masses in the middle, not drawn with any great detail. That was something that they did when they were showing the bigger picture. And so you have land masses right here, and out beyond where we can travel, they have these portals in the heavens blowing in from four different directions, just like Enoch describes. And when you go to Google Translate and see what these words are saying, you see here that it says of the degrees and their differences in many parts of the world. I was like, what is that? Let me scroll around to another corner and see what it says. And I went to another corner, typed it in Google Translate, and it says of the wind and the cause of their cold and heat. And so they're giving credit to these portals in the heavens for causing winds and cold and heat, just like Enoch describes. And when you look at how their maps are laid out, there's other pages in their book. They don't just have one map and they stop there. They give you more descriptions and they show you the directions. And it's not just out being south, outwards becomes south, west, north, and east when you translate what these words are on the outside. And these little spikes seem random, seem artistic, but I'm finding out these are not random. I was talking about that Babylonian map earlier and how it's really old. And this map, they say, was just the known world back then, that these people were pretty ignorant to what was really out there, but they have these world maps that have the exact same amount of spikes as these newer maps. I don't think these people were collaborating with each other. But when you outline the more near spikes, you have 8 on the outer edges here and 8 on the outer edges here. The man who was breaking this down in the video I watched said that these represent mountains. Enoch said he saw some giant mountains on the outer edges. And so Enoch seeing the giant mountains, I believe he only saw 7 though. So there's an 8th spike. I don't know why there's an 8th spike on these. Maybe there was another mountain that Enoch didn't mention, maybe one that they thought was significant enough to be placed there. And so they have this known world of Babylon with descriptions of what's out there. Once you go across what they call the bitter water, or I would assume the ocean, you go out across it so far, you run into an ice wall, a giant structure. They say that their wall, according to the Babylonian map, was well over 1,000 feet. And when you go to the Antarctic shoreline, you see shorelines just like that. So these shorelines are huge. I think we take for granted how massive these things are. In certain areas, it says here that Mount Jackson, located on Palmer Land on the Antarctic Peninsula, has an elevation of 3,184 meters. When you convert that to feet, it's over 10,000 feet. So they have some really tall areas near their shoreline and on their shoreline. depending on the amount of ice there is. That can vary, but Antarctica doesn't get a whole lot of rain. It's the driest place in the world, so just a couple inches of rain, or snow, I should say, every single year in Antarctica. And this old Babylonian map doesn't just give descriptions of land and shorelines and mountains out there. It talks about Noah's Ark. They say that the remnants of it were still there, and then if you went on a journey in a certain direction, you would pass the ark itself and you would see that wreckage. And so you could imagine how well preserved it would have been before Christ. I'm not really sure the exact age of that map. I'll have to look that up. But definitely, from their claim, the Smithsonian, the oldest map in the world, of the world. And so things are starting to get interesting just from this little bit of digging we're doing, but it's going to get more in depth as we look at other anomalies with the South. And so, in the South, of course, with the portals of the heavens being there blowing the winds, if you wanted to predict weather, you would have stations set up all around the world. We have them all around the outer edges. And I'm not saying this is an accurate map, but, you know, as accurate as we can make in the moment, we have Antarctica having stations all around it, weather stations showing us where the winds are coming from and where the fastest winds in the world are. And we see Antarctica having the fastest winds. We've talked about this before. They are blowing in over the land all in the same direction. Look at that. Left to right, west to east. It would be so easy to circumnavigate in a sailboat this direction because that's the way the winds are blowing. And that's where they are the fastest. They are faster in the south because that's where the winds are coming from. Antarctica and New Zealand have the fastest average winds every single year, getting up there with speeds close to those jet streams, 150 miles per hour on a regular basis in Antarctica, Commonwealth Bay. And in windy Wellington, they call it, in New Zealand, they have extremely fast winds as well, 154 miles per hour with average wind speeds of about 27 miles per hour. Doesn't seem fast, but that's their average. And that is extremely fast. Again, more powerful winds in the south. But we started looking up when we were looking at climate and weather for Creation Standard where the coldest places on Earth are. And they tell us the coldest ever place was in Antarctica on a high ridge on the East Antarctic Plateau. So we looked up the coldest temperatures in Antarctica versus the Arctic, and the coldest and warmest temperatures of those two places are quite different, with Antarctica having the coldest award by 35.3 degrees. That's how much colder the coldest temperature in Antarctica was compared to the Arctic's coldest temperature, which was negative 93 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 69.6 degrees Celsius. Huge difference. We're in triple digits when we go to the Antarctic. Negative 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Go to the warmest day in Antarctica, you have 64.9 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty warm. Warm enough to wear, jeans and a t-shirt probably. But then you go to the Arctic, warm enough to get sunburn. Triple digits. Hottest recorded temperature in the Arctic, 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius. Wow. Huge difference. 35 degrees in both directions. Different. That's a lot. And they record what they say, those cold temperatures, from an area that's between Dome A and I believe Dome F. And NASA gives you their rendition of these places, making it look more dome shaped. That's why they say they got the names dome, because of their shape in some places. But these places are flat. They aren't dome-like whatsoever. There's a chance they are near the dome or put in place because of their location near the dome. But these domes, Dome A, Dome B, Dome C, they have so many places named Dome in Antarctica. They don't have places named Dome in the Arctic, but they do there in Antarctica. And their names also have, of course, pagan origins. But Dome A, it's not just labeled that way because of the alphabet, it's labeled or named after Argus. And when you look that word up, Argus was appointed by the goddess Hera to watch the cow into which Lo, Hera's priestess, had been transformed, but it says he was slain by Hermes, the son of Zeus, who was called, if I'm saying this right, Argifontes, the slayer of Argus. So you have that Greek so-called mythology, clash of the Titans mentioned in Enoch, where the Nephilim were battling it out, bleeding into all of these names we have today with common places and things and missions, the moon missions and all these different things, or the sun god missions. And so Dome C would be named after Circe, and that is a name also from Greek mythology, where Circe bewitched the queen of Aea Island. Not an easy name to pronounce. Aea Island, one of the children of the solar god Helios. Imagine that. So, giving honor to the sun god Helios with Dome C. And of course, the Oceanid nymph purse. I didn't know what an oceanic nymph was, but I looked it up. The Oceanids or the Oceanides are the nymphs who were 3,000, a number interpreted as meaning innumerable daughters of the Titans Oceanus, the daughters of the giants. That's what they're naming these places after. Wonder why they would do that. And Dome F, named after Fuji. And Fuji, of course, is immortal or many soldiers. It is a Japanese name, and Dome F is a Japanese territory. So they're naming these after immortal soldiers, daughters of the giants. Protecting Antarctica, guarding it. Demonic powers guarding Antarctica. And so lots of sinister stuff there. But don't worry, the science is going to come in to show us that they're hiding it for a reason. And it's because, again, the South is not like the North. We talked about this before. The hurricanes are more prevalent in the North, and you would think, why is that? Because the winds are coming from here. Wouldn't they be closer to the South? Well, if these portals are blowing these storms away, they're not going to be able to come back and go to the South. And when you look at their paths, they are much further from the South and extremely close to the North Pole and more numerous in the North. You have these winds and these storms going as close as 600 miles away from the North Pole, but only 4,330 miles from the South Pole. Not even close. That is a major difference. And it's because those storms cannot turn around and come back towards those powerful portals of the heavens. And so the four corners of the earth and the angels going there to stop the four winds of heaven makes a lot more sense when you understand that concept. Just like those four winds of heaven being discovered in the 1920s make a lot more sense with this concept. But now we're going to look at something we haven't talked about yet outside of our classes with Creation Standard, where we see who experiences the most days of darkness. Because when you go to Google, it'll say it's dark for 6 months in the north and dark for 6 months in the south, which isn't wrong, but I wanted to know exact days. And they tell us that the South Pole experiences the most darkness per year with 182 and a half days of darkness. Why is that a big deal? Well, we had studied in our firmamental class the gates of the sun, and when the sun goes to the north, it's going there for a specific amount of time. You have the new year starting with the fourth gate, and it goes to the north and makes its journey back for 6 months, taking 182 days. And so you have 182 days or 182 and a half days of darkness at the South Pole. What about the North? Should be even on the globe, right? Well, it's not. We have the Arctic experiencing 179 days of darkness. And when you add those two numbers up, you don't get 365. You get 362 days. Enoch tells us there's 364 days in a year. Of course, you'd have to intercalate to not get way off track. And there's a lot of calendar people out there who understand Enoch and the calendar way better. People like my wife and many others out there who have been studying this. But you know that these numbers have something missing. There's 3 days a year where both the Antarctic and the Arctic are experiencing some sunlight at the exact same time. I'd like to see that worked out on the globe model. I might actually try that and see what that looks like. Trying to mimic it with that version versus the biblical Earth. And so I thought that was fascinating and something worth sharing, because the gates of the sun, or how that sun moves, will help you see why we see different anomalies with the sun. And when you read Enoch, it even sounds like the portals on one side in the east are higher than the ones in the west. So you literally have a curved sun path, not a curved earth path or tilt. We're not tilted 23.4 degrees. with 66.6 degrees remaining to get to 90. The path of the sun, I believe, based on what I read, I'm not saying I'm right, sounds like it's tilted. So you can have some really cool anomalies there within the firmament. And experimenting with lenses, you can see why the sun would do the amazing things it does and gives each viewer their own unique perspective of the sun. And so the sun, the darkest place in the world being Antarctica, makes more sense on the biblical earth. And then the hottest places in the world. This is where it gets weird because I would have thought it was on the equator, but it's not. It's many miles above the equator, with California having Death Valley being specifically the hottest ever recorded temperature, 134.1 degrees Fahrenheit. You can cook your food there without a stove, it's that hot. But it's 2,500 miles north of the equator. The north is not like the south. And when you go to the other hottest place in the world, you have the hottest yearly average temperatures also being above the equator, with Dalal, Ethiopia, 984 miles north of the equator. It's about what you would expect with our local sun. But then we look at where the driest place in the world is, and they tell us it's Antarctica. It's classified as a desert. It's the driest place in the world. Only 2 inches of precipitation, mostly snow per year, making it what they call a polar desert. And so Antarctica gets its first place medal for being the driest place, the coldest place, the darkest place, the place with the lowest air pressure, the place with the lowest population. Almost nobody lives there. When you have millions of people living above the 60th north parallel, you have almost no one living below the 60th south parallel. So you also have the coldest water temperature ever recorded being in the Antarctic. So it's first place for that as well. It also gets first place for having the highest land elevation of any place in the world on average. And it also gets first place for being the most guarded continent in the world. And how does it do this? Well, it's because it's not like the North. And so you can obviously see the North is not like the South. But one last thing I wanted to share has to do with the Coriolis effect and those winds blowing above the surface of the world. Because we talked about the jet streams already moving east above us at about 150 miles per hour. That's why plane flights will take longer to complete their journey when they're flying against the wind. And it has nothing to do with the world moving beneath them. Those winds are flying faster in the direction that the Earth is supposed to be spinning. So it's going to take less time for you actually to go the direction the Earth is spinning. How cool is that? And these are the winds up above us, 5 to 9 miles high. When you go to the winds below that, I always assumed, because when I look at the weather, the winds are moving from west to east, that had to do with the Earth's rotation when I was, younger, growing up, watching the news. And I just assumed, because I only saw the weather from my location, that it would be very similar everywhere else. And boy, was I wrong. I found out that we have what is called westerly winds where I live, coming from the west. They're not going west, they're coming from the west. That's why it's called a westerly wind. Kind of confusing, I get that. But these westerly winds have been going that direction my entire life. I've watched them on the weather channels and networks showing us that. And then I did not realize, though, when you go further south, they change directions. They are now moving southwest, coming from the northeast. So they are northeasterly trade winds. And then you have your southeasterly trade winds when you go a little further south, coming from the southeast, going to the northwest. And then when you go a little further south, they go back and become westerly winds, coming from the west, going to the east. So you have different directions on the globe with winds that are supposed to be following the earth. The atmosphere is supposed to be stuck to the earth, following it with all of its speeds, 66,600 miles per hour around the sun, 490,000 miles per hour around the galaxy. These winds are stuck to it, but they can't even make up their mind which direction to go at different elevations and different latitudes. All of these different things. And not in that, when you look at Asia, this is what really blew my mind. Asia was left blank. And I thought, why is there no arrows right here? Why is this entire landmass just left blank? And then did some research and found out that the winds don't even blow the same direction all year. They'll come from the north in the winter and come from the south in the summer. So it changes directions. I had to add these arrows in. Most of the wind maps of the world leave that part of the world blank. And I think it's because they don't want you to see that it changes, because it does. And it has to do with those portals of the heavens opening and closing. And that's why the word tells us they can shut up heaven so that it doesn't rain. Imagine that. Why would you have to shut up heaven to make it not rain? All you'd have to do is just hold back the clouds. But they have to shut up those portals of the heavens for a reason. The Messiah tells us that it happened like that in Elijah's time when it wasn't raining, that they had shut up heaven. And so these winds above us and below us, going whichever direction they are going, because of those portals in the heavens. Above, an immovable world, not a moving world with wind stuck to it. Wind maps of the world verify that. Not only that, they will tell us, of course, though, that the Coriolis effect is why we have certain wind patterns, things like hurricanes. When you look at their directions in the northern hemisphere, they're going counterclockwise. Southern hemisphere, they're going clockwise. Problem is, storms like hurricanes are large quantities of water moving above the world. And they are moving most of the time those directions. Tornadoes can defy those laws. Sometimes we have tornadoes in the northern hemisphere not doing what they're supposed to. And so when you look at what happens to the water beneath them, this is what's interesting. The ocean currents don't go the same direction, and they're said to be going their direction because of the Coriolis effect. And so in the northern hemisphere, water's going clockwise below the hurricanes that are above them going counterclockwise. So two bodies of water are moving the opposite direction in both the north and the south. The south is the same type of system where you have clockwise hurricanes, counterclockwise water currents, with the outer waters in the south matching Enoch's description, saying that the waters are pouring in from the west. And there you see, right there, outer edges, waters pouring in from the west, going to the east, impacting all these currents. And so you could imagine that water running into this continent, going up, warming up, traveling all the way back around, making this figure eight type of pattern continually, and keeping these waters in motion, keeping the waters pure by intelligent design. That's why these waters aren't stagnant. They are moving. They are filtering themselves out with the sand. So much stuff going on there. And not only that, it continues to get worse. We're going to look at more wind patterns that are strange. You have what's called these cells with your polar cells, your mid-latitude cells, and your Hadley cells not sticking to the globe whatsoever and staying with it. They are spiraling in many different directions, clockwise up in the north, counterclockwise as you go a little further south, and then going back to clockwise, counterclockwise, clockwise, counterclockwise. I mean, all around, total different directions, while you also simultaneously have those other wind directions that we've already talked about. And all of this stuff would be madness if we didn't understand the intelligent design behind it, and the fact that they aren't moving this direction because of a spinning globe. They're moving this direction based on the creation principles of our world that are mentioned in the Word. And again, they make so much more sense when you look at these wind patterns. You can go to wind maps of the world and just check them out for yourself and see that they are faster in the south, slower in the north. All of these things making far much more sense on the biblical earth. And you can, of course, explore them. Dave Watts on his app has some really cool features where you can download that and check out the winds on the biblical earth. Something that's a lot of fun to do, exploring these things. But that's it. That's all I wanted to share. I know there's so much more. Just wanted to give you guys a Cliff Notes version of what we have been looking into with Creation Standard, what the Father's been revealing to us. It's not stuff that I'm just finding out because I'm a genius. It's stuff that He is helping us see as we put His words to the test. And the good news is, if you want to catch up on that journey and see what it's all about, you can join us. We start back up in September. September 2nd, to be exact, we will start our classes for Creation Standard. Registration for that semester is already available online. You don't have to pay or anything. You can register now. Give us a head count so we can know how to prepare and know if I'm going to need help with taking care of classes, because I've had many people volunteer to help. I just don't have the financial ability to do so. So if you want to support Creation Standard, please, if you feel led to do so, now would be a good time to give, because we have a lot of work before us, and I'm not going to be getting paid throughout the summer, that steady paycheck that I'm used to having. as a teacher in the public school setting. So if you want to support us so that we can actually sit and work making the workbooks for each class, that would be great. Because this year was a building year. We were making everything as we went along. And now that we have a pacing guide and a somewhat, you know, and lessons in place, we can take those and turn those into workbooks that can then be used to guide the journeys next year of people working from home. And so I hope that you guys have been blessed by a lot of this information as it helps provide clarity as to what the world is and isn't, and how the winds move, and how that aligns with things that we see in prophecy. And of course, Revelation coming true every single day, especially things going on in the world that we'll be talking about soon. Things like the American Pope of Rome that we now have, things that are far deeper and rooted into things that I believe show us more closely where we are on our prophetic timeline and how the things of Rome are going to most likely return very soon. And so that is it. You guys are a major blessing. We thank you for all your support and the things that you guys are doing for us that, a lot of times doesn't get recognition. Those of you who are supporters, patrons, and moderators, you know who you are. You guys are the best. We thank you for all that you have done. And so we love you guys. The Father loves you. We will see you next time.